You're listening to the Sex and Psychology Podcast, the sex ed you never got in school and won't get anywhere else. I am your host, Dr. Justin Lehmiller. I am a social psychologist and research fellow at the Kinsey Institute and author of the book, Tell Me What You Want, The Science of Sexual Desire and How It Can Help You Improve Your Sex Life. For decades, sexual debut, meaning the very first time someone has sex, was treated as a nearly universal milestone of adolescence or very early adulthood. Virginity was often viewed as a temporary status, something people were expected to leave behind in their youth. But today's reality looks very different. More young adults are delaying their sexual debut than previous generations, and many are reaching their 20s or even their 30s without ever having had sex. At the same time, virginity itself has become increasingly stigmatized, leaving many people to feel isolated, ashamed, or convinced that they're somehow falling behind. So what's really driving this shift? Is it about increased screen time, the challenges of modern dating, rising anxiety, or something else? And why has virginity become a social liability? That's what we're talking about today. My guests are Dr. Danielle Harrell and Celeste Hirschman, and they are the co-creators of the Somatica Method and co-founders of the Somatica Institute, where they have trained coaches around the world in an experiential approach to sex, relationships, and personal transformation. Together, they have spent more than 20 years helping individuals and couples understand the deeper patterns shaping intimacy, communication, and desire. They are the authors of 3 books and serve as the lead sexologists and co-executive producers of the UK Channel 4 award-winning series, Virgin Island. In this episode, we're not just exploring why adult virginity is becoming more common, but also what the TV series Virgin Island can teach all of us about modern intimacy and healthy relationships. This is going to be another fascinating conversation that you won't want to miss. Stick around and we're going to jump in right after the break. If you love the science of sex as much as I do, consider becoming a friend of the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. The Kinsey Institute is the world's premier research organization on sex and relationships, and you can help them continue the legacy of Dr. Alfred Kinsey, whose pioneering research changed everything we think we know about sex. Visit kinseyinstitute.org to make an impact. Your donations can help support ongoing research projects on critical topics. You can also show your support by following Kinsey Institute on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for supporting sex science. Hi, Danielle and Celeste, and welcome to the show.
Hi, we're excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have both of you here. So let's talk about virginity, or what researchers often call sexual debut. So when people hear the word virgin, they often picture a teenager who's waiting for their first sexual experience. But today we're seeing more adults who are reaching their mid-20s or beyond without having had sex. In fact, in a representative survey we conducted at the Kinsey Institute last year, we found that about 1 in 5 single adults identified as virgins, which struck me as surprisingly high. So what's going on here? Why do you think more young adults are reaching adulthood without having had sex?
You know, when we came to Virgin Island, that was exactly the reason that we're invited to do the show. It was really about, in the UK, they found research that 1 in 8 young adults did not have sex. And it was kind of like, okay, we need to do something about it. And I think there's so many reasons that it's more challenging for younger people these days to have sex. And a lot of it is, I will say, Instagram, social media, and the prevalence of internet and like porn, like you can get your needs met and you don't really need to go out there and have sex with other people. And also a lot of fear from surveillance and shaming that happens through social media. And this level of interaction with devices doesn't help people develop skills around intimacy and relationships. So they feel like very ill-equipped, and there's so much ghosting and so much issues in meeting and connecting with other people. So it becomes very challenging.
I just always think about privacy, like I feel like when I was young, there was lots of times my parents didn't even know where I was, and they couldn't track me on any phone. I didn't have one. They didn't exist. They were at home with my parents. So, just having this feeling of like being able to like have experiences and do things and not feel like you're being watched or everybody's going to like say horrible things about you or post videos of you doing anything, it just like, there's just so much tension, like I'm being watched, So I think the surveillance thing for me, like really hits home when I think about like why people aren't having experiences. I do feel like they're just not learning about how to be more intimate. And there's so much focus on texting and phones. And there's not like, you don't just pick up the phone and call someone anymore or say hi to a stranger. Like, especially here, like we're in Silicon Valley, like no one ever looks at me out in the world. And I'm like, hi. Sometimes they won't even respond when you say hello overtly. And it's like, I'm a person. So yeah, it's interesting.
Let alone that people just actually do not interact that much in the world at all. Not, and then like if they do, as Celeste said, they're walking and looking at their phones. But then like there's so much tension around doing the right thing. Okay, like am I responding to this text in time? Am I saying something too personal or too early? And then there's like needing to do the dating and the connection. And then there's a whole other part of reporting to your friends. I hear it a lot from 20 years olds. Like, what do I tell to my friends about it? Was it a successful date? Is it normal? There's a lot of questions like, is that how it's supposed to progress?
Yeah, I think it's really a complex and multifaceted thing in terms of why young people are more likely to reach adulthood as virgins. And, the technology is part of it, that we're spending so much time on our phones and our devices, and that's reducing a lot of opportunities for in-person interaction. But you're so right with the surveillance part. And something else to add to that is that young people are living at home with their parents longer than they were in the past. A lot of people are reaching their mid-20s still living at home. And when you're living at home with your parents, it can be a little harder to hook up or have a sexual relationship. So, the privacy and the surveillance is certainly an issue, I think, for a lot of young folks. But I think there's also this deep insecurity that I'm seeing among a lot of younger people where they feel too intimidated to even reach out to someone else. And they don't want their attempt at flirting with somebody else to be interpreted or taken the wrong way. And so it's become this really kind of high stakes thing for a lot of people where flirting actually kind of feels dangerous and risky in a way that it didn't feel so much in the past. So I think the world has just changed in a lot of ways. And then also layer on top of that, the COVID pandemic. And, a lot of these people were pulled out of school, during a time, like a formative time in life where they otherwise might have had their first kiss or gone to their high school prom or something like that, and maybe had some of those early sexual experiences. And so I think we're seeing a lot of delayed development in terms of kind of like reaching adult milestones for those young people who kind of had that really disruptive COVID pandemic occur during that particular formative time in life.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. And people are not comfortable with like awkwardness, not resilient around rejection. As somebody was asking me the other day, well, how do you ask someone out on a date? And I'm like, my hands shake, like I sweat, like I'm afraid that they're going to say no. I can barely get words out of my mouth when I'm trying to type their number into my phone. Maybe it's the wrong number because my hand is shaking. So you have to sort of be willing to take a risk and deal with all of that intensity. And I don't think there's a lot of practice for that. And for just socializing, like you said, with the pandemic, it's just like all those years of practice of just like being with other people and having all of that awkwardness and uncertainty just really weren't there.
I want to add to that because I think if you look at the modeling that because there's so much on Instagram and TikTok, the modeling that this is actually a result of practicing and perfection. And, like to produce a real reel, you need to like work it out a little bit and you polish it. So they think that they're supposed to be like that they need to have the end result already polished without fumbling through the practice. So all this like needing to know before being able to make mistakes is really like in the way.
Definitely. So in talking about virginity, I can't help but think about how people's feelings on this topic have changed over the years. So in the Western world, virginity used to be this prized status in that being a virgin was often eroticized, especially among men. But modern studies show that virginity has become stigmatized. So in a Kinsey Institute study conducted by my colleague, Dr. Amanda Gesselman, a few years back, she found that most people said they would be reluctant to date a virgin. And that was true for both men and women. And further, even virgins said they didn't want to date other virgins. So do you have any thoughts on what's changed here? How did virginity become this social liability that it's seen as today?
I mean, I'm really sad that it's a social liability, but I'm kind of happy that it's not eroticized and put up as this amazing thing anymore, because that was very slut shaming. It would be so nice to have this middle ground, right? Like, you don't have to have experience, but there's no such thing as too much experience. You know what I mean? Like, it would be nice if people could be just like, I'm going to see if I can work out intimacy with this person. And I don't have this requirement that they have to have or haven't done something. In the long run, anyway, intimacy between any two people is completely different. And so you have to work it out, whether you have experience or not. I don't know why it's stigmatized. And I still think in some communities, there's still like the virginity requirement, especially for women, like religious communities. But I do feel like I am happy that that's changing. And I wish we could just like not have to make one or the other right or wrong.
Yeah. And you're right that there is regional and cultural variation in terms of norms and attitudes about virginity. But I think, another part of the story here, as you were mentioning, people kind of have these weird attitudes about it. When we look at the data and research, what we see is that most people say they don't want a partner who has no sexual experience, but they don't want a partner who's too experienced at the same time. And so when you look at these studies, they ask, how willing would you be to date somebody who had, this many numbers of partners in the past? And it's very low when it's 0 partners, but it increases with 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think it goes up to about 7 or 8, where they're like, that person becomes more desirable. But at that point, the numbers start dropping off and becoming really low. So there's sort of this weird idea out there that like, I want a partner who is experienced, but not more experienced than me, because that would, lead to some insecurity or something else. It's just, people kind of just have this idea that there's a quote unquote right or optimal amount of sexual experience.
I was thinking about it a little bit. Like, I think I hear a lot this term, like build a boyfriend. People want to have like the perfect product, and it includes like how much experience they have, how much experience I have, how much we actually match. There's also a lot of, like grading based on that. Like we used to do like, she's a 10, I'm a 7, like it's cool to date her. So I think there's like this kind of matching around like sexual experience as well that helps people feel more secure if they feel that someone is somewhere in a place that they feel comfortable with, but maybe not so secure if someone is too experienced and not experienced enough.
People's attitudes towards sex, as always, are complex. So we keep talking about virginity, but it's actually a surprisingly slippery concept, right? People disagree about what counts as sex, which means they're also going to disagree about what counts as quote unquote losing one's virginity. So is virginity even like a useful concept anymore? Or, is it time to retire the term? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, we are the lead sexologists on Virgin Island, but it's not about losing virginity, because it's more about gaining experience and learning about who you are as a sexual being. And it's like, and what is losing virginity, right? Like, it's a very heteronormative perspective to looking at that, because it only means like a penis goes into a vagina. What about the other ways of sex? Like, what about oral sex? What about making out? What about fingering? I don't know if we can say all those things on the show, but I'm just saying it.
You can say anything you want.
Thank you. So all those terms, like, what about making out? What about like sharing erotic experiences? So there's such a huge variety around what will be arousing and sexual. And people just limit and look at sex as this like very narrow thing. And it's very sad because they're eating from the kiddie menu.
Yeah, I really loved one of the women on the show. A while after the show ended, she said, I don't define myself as a virgin anymore. And it's like, I'm not telling you what I did or didn't do. Like, it doesn't have to be about intercourse, because there's a lot of practices, sexual practices, like BDSM practices. You might not even take your clothes off, but you can get so aroused. You can even orgasm, so it's like, what, does that count? Yeah.
Yeah. And also when you think about like digital sexual experiences, like if you're interacting with, say, a cam model, like you might have a very intimate online session with them, and maybe you even orgasm during it, but you didn't have in-person physical contact, right? And that's still a sexual experience. And so the nature of sex is changing. And so that means, the nature of the concepts around virginity are changing too. And so, if you ask me to define what virginity means, I actually don't really know, because sex just means different things to different people.
Definitely.
So let's talk about the show that you've worked on called Virgin Island. So for listeners who have never seen it, can you tell us first, like, what is the premise of the show? What is it all about?
Yeah, we literally brought 12 virgins to an island in Croatia and helped them in a very experiential and hands-on way learn about sex and intimacy. But, both like physical intimacy, but also emotional intimacy and communication and consent and asking for what you want. It's a very in-depth program that they go through, and has been very life-changing for the folks who have taken part.
And we already have season 2 in the UK that you can, if you're in the UK, you need to watch it there or in other ways. But it's been a huge success because people really, really loved watching it. The first season, they were also like very much cringing to watch it. It was fascinating to see people's reactions. The audience, they were like cringing and like, who does that? And it's so horrible. But second season, we was like, oh, wow, like that's really cool. And I'm so excited to show it. So it like really turned around.
If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you've probably heard me talk about how much I love Cozy Earth. Their sheets have become one of my favorite ways to make my bedroom feel a little more luxurious. And this summer, I've been bringing that same Cozy Earth feeling outside of the bedroom. I'm talking about their beach towels. These are definitely not your average towels. They're oversized, incredibly plush, and they have that premium feel. And getting out of the pool or the ocean, you want something soft, comfortable, and absorbent. Not a thin, scratchy beach towel that seems to move the water around more than it actually dries you off. Cozy Earth's beach towels feel genuinely elevated, like something you'd expect to find at a luxury resort. Even if you're not spending much time at the beach or pool this summer, Cozy Earth also makes everyday bath towels, including plush and waffle options, so you can bring more of that spa-like feeling into your own home. And Cozy Earth stands behind everything they make with a 10-year warranty. Oversized, ultra plush, and completely built for your best summer days, Cozy Earth's beach towels will be your new poolside essential. Head to cozyearth.com and use my code JUSTIN for an exclusive 20% off. That's code JUSTIN for an exclusive 20% off. And if you see a post-purchase survey, mention that you heard about Cozy Earth right here. Yeah, and I actually learned about your show from some of my listeners who said they had seen it and they were really surprised by it, and that it wasn't like the typical reality TV relationship show that they were expecting, where it didn't feel overly sensationalized and it felt like you were actually teaching people like real and valuable skills, and they felt like they actually learned something from it. So they suggested I have you on the show. And so I did a deep dive into your work, and I'm like, yep, I definitely want to talk to them about this because this is fascinating. So what is it that made you want to be part of this show? Like, what drew you to it in the first place?
We really did want for people to see that you could teach intimacy while in intimacy with people. That's our unique method, the Somatica method. And we thought, what an amazing place to be able to help all of these young people who don't know much about intimacy and sex, and to help them progress through this experiential work. So it was very inspiring for us to help people see this way of learning about intimacy, because there's not a lot of places you can go and practice intimacy with someone. And that's what our method is all about.
So, when people hear the premise of your show, Virgin Island, they would probably assume like, oh, you're just going to put a bunch of virgins on an island and the goal is for them to all have sex with each other, or, have it end in an orgy or something like that. But that's not what your show is about, right? It's not about helping people to quote unquote lose their virginity or have their sexual debut. It's really, as you described, about helping them become more comfortable with intimacy and communication in their own bodies. So can you give us a sense of what that actually looks like? Maybe walk us through an exercise or experience that you had participants go through?
Yeah, it's really exciting for us because it was really us, as Celeste said, bringing the Somatica method to TV. We're having an immersion that starts tomorrow. And we we looked at the schedule and what we're teaching is like, oh, we did this in Virgin Island. We did this on Virgin Island. So we're literally helping them build practical skills of relating and touch and seduction. So for example, how to bring erotic energy. Okay. How do you feel erotic energy? How do you bring erotic energy and then flirt with someone means talking something very casual with someone while feeling this exciting energy in your body and keeping eye contact. How do you recognize the look? How do you make a move to reach out? So this is a little example, but we also cover things like consent and how do you escalate or keep connecting with someone while checking for ongoing consent. So like really powerful and foundational tools around seduction, but also things like body image and accepting your body and feeling good in your body, and things like sex education, like vibrators and how to use them and orgasm. So it's a very kind of like broad show that helps them get in touch with themselves and get information about sex and relationship.
One really fun new exercise that we introduced in season 2 is called pillow talk. And it's sort of like, how do you like verbally escalate with somebody? How do you talk in a sexy way? What's your style of verbal escalation? Is it romantic? Is it passionate? Is it like playing with power a little bit? And how do you bring touch in with that energy? So yeah, pillow talk was a fun demo. Danielle and I demo with each other. And then, they all freak out being like, oh my God, I think I can never do that. And then by the end, they're like doing it with each other. So it's really, really fun to watch that progression.
In some ways, it sounds like the things that you're teaching people are things that really should be part of sex education. Like this is really about learning how to communicate and connect with somebody else and understand consent and how do you flirt with someone without making it awkward, and how do you feel comfortable and confident in your own skin? Like these are skills that everybody needs, right? And I think that's also part of the reason why, we've seen that rise in the number of adult virgins, is because we're just not teaching people these skills. And then that creates all these feelings of insecurity, and it just becomes even harder. And who's out there teaching them unless they go out and actively seek out this information on their own? So yeah, I think what you're doing is really important work, and you're teaching people these really foundational things. I'm just sad that these things aren't part of traditional sex ed.
Totally. I'm with you. And one of the participants at the end, final ceremony, they just talked about how important it is for them and how they wish that everyone learned it in high school and got these tools, because the world will be completely different if that happened.
I do feel like a focus on pleasure would actually be really, really empowering. I used to do research on adolescent sexuality development at a research center. And one of the things we found is that learning about pleasure actually helps people take better care of themselves. They're more likely to communicate, use protection. I call it the protective power of pleasure, that when we feel like we have a right to pleasure and we deserve pleasure, we actually take better care of ourselves. So, that's something I think that they don't think about at all for sex education. Like,
No.
if you teach people about pleasure, they're all going to go wild and crazy. And it's like, no, if you don't teach them about anything, they're going to go wild and crazy because they won't know like how to have a boundary and how to communicate and how to take good care of themselves. But they'll still be horny. So something's going to happen. You know what I mean? Just like not the really good things, in my opinion.
So you just want them to be horny and ignorant? Like it doesn't make any sense.
I know, but also like I think people don't realize how the power of pleasure and the power of knowledge of like feeling confident about your body, about moving in your body, about seducing someone actually impacts other parts of life. Because what we saw with the participants is like the level of confidence they got from the show and participating in the show helped them stop gaming at home and start to throw away the gaming machine and starting to actually interact with people outside, traveling, going and doing things that they did not feel like they can do before, let alone connecting with other people and creating relationships. So it's not just about connection and intimacy. It's about getting confidence to move and be an adult and be yourself in the world.
Yeah. And so your show, Virgin Island, isn't just meant for other virgins to watch, right? There are practical skills and information that anybody, regardless of their sexual history, could take away and learn from this to maybe improve and enhance their own intimate life, right?
That was one of our biggest goals with the show, is that it just sort of like gave everybody this information and they could practice it at home with partners and they could practice it in their dating life. And you can't even believe how many like DMs that we get just saying like, I just came out at 45. I just like had this whole new communication with my partner and we're having a way better connection now. Just from getting that information and, really democratizing it, like having it be available to everyone, which is what we want more than anything, just like everyone to know these tools and to be able to use them.
So looking back across the different participants you've had on your show, were there any particular lessons or transformations that surprised you? Did the experience change the way that you think about virginity or intimacy?
Kind of no. I feel like it wasn't surprising. It was more affirming of things that we saw when we're like teaching somatica to other people that like coaches that want it's like it's almost the same for many people in the way that they're like you start to embrace yourself and embrace sexuality and have like knowledge and you feel confident and then you can do so many things. Then you're unstoppable in many ways. So I feel like for me, it was like seeing it in action in such a short amount of time with people who came with so little skills and so much shame about who they were was just like really affirming and really exciting.
Yeah, I do think that was the part that surprised me because we hadn't had the opportunity to have like a 3-week live-in immersion in our work yet to see how much change happens in that level of immersion. Like, I'm ready for us to have our own island because we see tremendous transformation. You know, we have a 6-month coaching program where people's whole lives change because they're doing this, 6-month program or something like that. But to have this very concentrated experience with people who really had no experience at all and just to see their lives change. We just got some updates recently about partners that they have now, or one of them had a baby just the other week, and it's like, oh my God. That kind of immersive experience changed people so quickly.
I just love how Celeste and I are so different. I was like, yeah, of course it's going to happen. She's like, yeah, it was amazing to see it happening. Same story, two sides of the same coin.
So it sounds like it was a life-changing experience for a lot of people. Now, when we hear about the rise of virginity, and also alongside that, there's the whole sex recession, like people today are having less sex than they were historically, and fewer partners as well. There's often a lot of panic about this, right? That people just aren't fucking anymore, right? It stoked a lot of concern in popular media articles and so forth about like why fewer people are having sex and so forth. But I think your show kind of provides some optimism against that kind of backdrop of this is all doom and gloom, because what you're showing is that these are all teachable skills. These are things that anybody can learn, right? And so maybe the takeaway from your show is that it is kind of like this more optimistic take on where the future of sex could go if we actually taught people the right skills.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I think that is exactly the case. Like, these are learnable skills. It's just that we don't think we're supposed to have to learn intimacy. It's supposed to just happen, but that's not the case. Like, a lot of times we didn't get good examples, or, TV is not a good example. Sometimes we did not have good examples in our families or communities about how to resolve conflict or, flirt or any of those kinds of things. And so we teach people, and people really transform when they get to practice.
Yeah, I also feel that it's actually having those skills and feeling that you have access to learning those skills can even be like immunity against violence and against incel culture. It's really immunity against what we see in the movie Adolescence, for example. Like, if people learn skills like we do in Virgin Island, there will be less people who need to feel isolated and lonely and so lost when it comes to understanding relationship and other human beings.
Yeah, totally agree. So one last question for you on this topic. If someone is listening who happens to be, say, in their 20s, maybe even their 30s, who feels embarrassed that they're still a virgin, what would you want them to know? What would you want them to take away from this conversation?
Well, firstly, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. We all have different progressions in life, and everybody is unique. And it's never too late to have an amazing erotic life if that's what you want. And also, it's okay if that's what you don't want. Like, I really want to take pressure off an expectation, and just say, like, it's possible, and you get to decide what kind of engagement you want to have.
Yeah, and that is something that I talk about in terms of my definition of sex positivity, which doesn't mean that we should be assuming that everybody has sexual desire or that everybody wants to have sex. It's about recognizing and respecting that different things are right for different people. Some people are asexual, some people are aromantic. Everybody is different, and there is not one right or correct sexual orientation or way to think about or have sex. And so we just kind of need to get away from some of our rigid, longstanding ideas about sex and sexuality. But again, that all goes back to having better sex education.
Yeah, because I think like it's one thing to decide who you are with no information, and another thing to decide who you are and what you want to do after you got information and had some experiences that helps you pave your way. So I think like I would love to build it on education and practices so people can choose and say like, I try this and no, I actually prefers to not do those things. I was like, good for you. You know?
Yes, good for you. So thank you for this amazing conversation. I'm really looking forward to continuing it in the next episode and talking all about core desires. Can you please tell my listeners where they can go to learn more about you and your work and also to take your quiz on core desires?
Definitely. So the quiz is on somatica.com/quiz. And that's also, you'll get to our website and you can learn more about us. If you want to be a coach and you want to learn more about that, go to somaticainstitute.com.
Well, I'll be sure to include links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate having both of you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To keep up with new episodes of this podcast, visit my website, Sex and Psychology, at sexandpsychology.com, or subscribe on your favorite platform, where I hope you'll take a moment to rate and review the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please consider becoming a Sex and Psychology Premium subscriber to enjoy ad-free listening for just $3.99 a month. You can also follow me on social media for daily sex research updates. I'm on Blue Sky and X at Justin Lehmiller and Instagram at Justin J. Lehmiller. Also, be sure to check out my book, Tell Me What You Want. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.